The new upgrade system in Forza Motorsport seems to be one of the most divisive elements of the game. Now, this BRZ that I did a full drift build on, it's got a V10 swap, it's turbo, all of these things. It's got the, drift suspension. It's a maxed out car in terms of car leveling. Now, that means that essentially I had to spend hours and hours and hours racing this thing in order to actually unlock all of the potential for these parts. Now, whether or not that's a good thing or a bad thing is entirely up to you and your own opinions. Now, a lot of people in the community seem to dislike this system because it does discourage customization freedom. And while I will say it doesn't eliminate that freedom, it does definitely discourage it, because if you're somebody that likes to build crazy drift cars, for example, you can't just boot up the game and do that. You have to pick a car, you have to spend hours upon hours racing it, and then maybe you can, have a go at the drift build you want to do. But since I have a considerable amount of time now, a considerable amount of hours into just racing this car online, I've managed to rank it up quite a lot. And so I figured, why not put all of those car points and all of those, car levels into a drift build? Because it's so interesting, right? Because if you look at sort of the landscape on YouTube around a new Forza game, it's usually always like whenever the game comes out, immediately a bunch of people are doing car builds. But that didn't really happen with Forza Motorsport, because the ability to do all of those car builds was literally progression locked. And while, yes, I'm sure there are a bunch of people out there that enjoy that gameplay grind and they enjoy that grind for the upgrades, and I can entirely appreciate the time and the hours that go into grinding for those upgrades. However, and this is genuinely like a huge asterisk on this, the upgrades should not be tied to the amount of time you've spent with a car. Because if you want to build a drift car, why should you have to spend hours racing it first in order to then turn it into a drift car later? It seems so incredibly gate kept, and that just doesn't seem like the spirit of Forza to me. But of course, y'all are more than free to let me know all of your thoughts on this in the comments down below. And with all of that, let's go ahead and dive into all of the parts I used to build this car. Now, the build is far from traditional. I mean, we swapped in a 5.2 liter V10 and strapped a couple of turbos to it. Well, I don't remember if it was a single turbo or a twin turbo setup. Either way, I wanted to use the 5.2 V10, and I knew that I wasn't necessarily going to use it for a track build because I felt like it would make the car a little bit too front heavy. And in terms of like testing out the BRZ in various online lobbies, it seems like it performs, in terms of racing anyway, it seems like it performs better as a B-class car than it does as an S-class car. So considering that, I was kind of like, we might as well just throw the crazy engine in it and just use that as a drift setup and enjoy it. And while it is far, far, far from any sort of like traditional drift build, or maybe necessarily like a low power drift build, I know that those are, I think, kind of more traditionally accepted, unless you're doing like, something like a Formula D style car or something along those lines. But again, I figured we have access to these parts, we might as well just go all out on them. And while I will say that I do not like the upgrade system whatsoever, I'll also say that the fact that everything is just unlocked already for you, and all you have to, like, you don't have to buy it necessarily. It's just like, as long as you have all the car points for it, you can just use it all. And that kind of allows you to just fly through the upgrade process extremely quickly. So once you do have all of the parts unlocked and available, it's actually really convenient. It's actually really convenient to use. But again, that requires all of those parts to be unlocked, which again is sitting behind hours and hours of grinding, which quickly becomes a lot less appealing if racing, for example, as opposed to drifting, isn't something you're into. Now, the tune that I did on this car was very simple. It was very, not necessarily bare bones, but it was very simple. It was very basic. It was just kind of like, yeah, I think this will work better. I think this will work better. I wanted to show it, so in case y'all wanted to use it as a baseline, you totally could. But at the same time, this is nothing final. This is not like, this is not some kind of like, hey, here's this tune, go and use it. It's more like, hey, this is how I got to the result that you saw in the video. And if you want to take the same path that I took to get there, you're more than welcome to use it, or use it as a guide, or use it as like a baseline, like I said before. But it is by no means a finished tune. So I went ahead and set up a test drive scenario at Maple Valley. And as far as fun tracks go, Maple Valley is about as fun as they get. And at least to me, Maple Valley is one of those tracks that has really withstood the test of time in terms of like the Forza series overall. And when I say it's withstood the test of time, I mean that in the sense that not only has it stuck around for multiple Forza games and multiple entries into the series, more than multiple, I would say many. I don't know the number off the top of my head, but enough that you could say many without being incorrect. And it's also a track that it retains that exact same style and vibe and feel every time they reiterate the track. Every time they update it, it still keeps that same feel that we know and love from Forza games of old. And it's also just a fun track overall. Like whether you're just racing, or you're doing time trial practice, or you're drifting, or whatever the case may be, it's one of those tracks that's fun in any discipline. It's fun in any type of car. It's fun in any type of gameplay. It's like you can bring a hypercar here and have a wonderful time. You can also bring a stock Miata here and have a wonderful time. You can also bring, as we see here, you can also bring a drift car here and have an absolutely wonderful time. And speaking of drift cars, now, I was actually not too sure what tire setup was going to be good for this. So what I decided to do was I decided to kind of like find my middle of the road point, and that ended up being sport tires. And once I kind of carried on with the sport tires, I was like, you know what? The sport tires aren't all that bad. They actually give you a lot of room to sort of play with the car while also having a pretty decent amount of grip still. So I actually think they're a pretty good choice overall for a setup like this. Now, needless to say, if you're going to be doing a build like this yourself, you obviously need to have as many assists off as possible. Obviously, traction control, stability control, all of that stuff needs to be entirely off if you want to be able to carry on your slides this long. However, you can kind of take or leave ABS. I have it on right now because I use it when I'm racing, and I honestly just forgot to turn it off to do this drift build. But it doesn't inhibit you from using the handbrake, and so you're good there. The only time like that having the ABS would mess with you is if you like to do a lot of like in-game equivalent of left foot braking. Because if you do, then it might start to kind of mess with you a little bit and maybe throw you off of the line that you wanted. But also, completely ignore my almost catastrophic mess up back there. It's fine. Didn't happen. Don't worry about it. It's literally all good. But back into something I wanted to talk about in relation to the upgrade system. I kind of worry that the grindiness of the upgrade system is going to put so many people off from doing things like drift builds and stuff like that we might see so much less like just hanging out and drifting lobbies than we did before. And, lobbies like that were kind of a mainstay of the Forza series for so long. And I think that locking upgrades behind this, like, essentially seat time wall is going to pretty much put players off of doing unorthodox builds. And I think putting players off of doing unorthodox builds is probably one of the worst mistakes you could make. And the reason I think it's such a big mistake is because it takes away that element of like someone being able to just choose, hey, I want to build a drift car now. Or, hey, maybe I don't own this game yet, but I want to go buy it so I can jump into it and build like a 240, a BRZ, and a Miata all as drift cars. and then I want to go drift them with my friends. But what they don't realize is they're about to get stuck behind hours and hours of grinding just to be able to get the parts to build the cars that they want to drift with their friends. And I think that that's such an oversight on the part of the development team when they developed this system, because if they did it based off of credits, I mean, yes, there would definitely be a bit of a grind still, but I think it would be a more understandable grind, because then people could allocate their resources towards the parts that they just wanted to use. Whereas with this system, it ends up being something more along the lines of, oh, you want to build a drift car? Well, too bad. You need to spend X amount of hours racing this car before you can do anything related to drifting it. And, oh, you want to do a big power drift build? Oh, you have to wait even longer. So again, I know I'm kind of just getting ranty about the overall upgrade system at this point, but let me know if y'all share these frustrations in the comments down below, and I will see y'all next time. Hope y'all enjoyed the build.